everyone. Really excited to have you here for our fifth webinar on the release of our multi-year study and multi-organizational study on Sowing a Colorful Revolution. It's a landscape report on global investments in fruits and vegetables. And we've had amazing partners, mainly our incredible 200 experts that were in West and East Africa, South Asia, and Central America who helped us complete this study. A lot of you have been on for our 4 other webinars, so welcoming you back. And those that are new, I'm Erin McGuire. I'm the Director of Responsible Innovations, which is the team leading this study. That originated out of UC Davis with partners at World Veg, University of Bonn, and IFPRI as a part of CGIR. And I'm joined today by incredible panelists as we start to do a deep dive into if we really want to make a difference in fruits and vegetables in the areas around the world we work, how do we engage women more in the marketplace? We know that fruits and vegetables have traditionally been considered women's crops. And women also, when you increase their incomes, you'll see that the family's nutrition also increases more so than if a man is head of household, income increases. So what we really want to try to do with fruits and vegetables, which are high income crops, is ensure that women are able to continue to participate in fruit and vegetable crops, while also increasing their incomes from those crops. And very often we'll see that men might take over a value chain once it starts making money. And so how do we really strategically consider how we promote access to fruit and vegetable value chains, including in the marketplace? And we also know that inclusive financing, when engaging women in the marketplace, is really important. And so we just have incredible experts here to talk about it. Some have been working in this space for their whole careers, and they're all coming at it from different angles. And Dr. Frida Assam will be leading us in our panel today. So we're really excited to have her from the University of Ghana, and she will introduce all of the other panelists. I will give a brief intro as I am now, and then I will pass it over to Caroline, who will go through very quickly setting the stage of fruits and vegetables and why it's so important, why this study is so important. And then Ashley from Responsible Innovations will go through a deeper dive into the study's results around market access for women. Then we'll go right into the panel, and then we'll backtrack a bit for those of you who haven't heard the report results yet, to talk about the higher level results from this study. We are doing it at the end because many of you have heard the results already, but we want to ensure that those that are new to this webinar series are able to get the results as well. And then I will close us down. So just thank you so much for everyone being here today for this hour and a half. We'll be discussing together, and it will be recorded, and we'll be able to share it out later. So thank you again, and I'm really excited to learn from our presenters. I will yield back to Caroline.
Thanks, Erin. Hi, everybody. I'm Caroline Joyce. I'm the Senior Nutrition Strategist at Responsible Innovations, and I'm really excited to be here with you all for this webinar. I also have a few notes of housekeeping as we go through the webinar today, so we'll record everything, and feel free to put your questions in the chat and we'll answer them through the webinar. Or if you would rather wait till the end of the panel, you're welcome to come off mute and ask any questions that you have either about the study results or of the panelists specifically. So with that, I will pass it over to Archie for his introduction.
Hello, everybody. I'm Archie Jarman. I'm also with Responsible Innovations. I was previously with the Horticulture Innovation Lab as the Associate Director, and I'm very excited to be here. And I'll pass it over to Ashley.
Ashley Mutiso here with Responsible Innovations based in Nairobi, Kenya. And I'm excited to be here. I think I'll pass it on to Frida.
Hello, everyone. My name is Frida Sem, and I'm a senior lecturer at the Department of Agricultural Economics and Agribusiness at the University of Ghana. And I'm glad to be here to have this all-important discussion. Thank you. Okay,
Great.
so I pass it back
Thank
to...
you all. I will go ahead and grab the mic. Thanks so much, everybody. So with that, we will get started with our findings. Let me just share my screen. All right. Great. So, oh wait. There we go. Okay. All right. So yes, thanks so much again, everyone, for joining us, and welcome to our 5th webinar of this series. So, but a bit of background just to set the stage for why investments in horticulture crops are so critical. As many of you know, food-based dietary guidelines often suggest that around half your plate should be fruits and vegetables. And a recent analysis said that about 93% of national food-based dietary guidelines that have been published agree with this recommendation. And these here are some examples of different food-based dietary guidelines from Ethiopia, the United States, and Malaysia. And in general, these different dietary guidelines suggest consuming around 5 to 7 servings in fruits and vegetables per day. However, we also know that world consumption of fruits and vegetables is not adequate for meeting the recommended intake. So right now, the estimates are that world production is about 390 grams per person per day. And that falls 10 grams short of what's recommended. However, this also includes the non-edible portion of fruits and vegetables. So the actual estimate of edible portions is far lower than that. And given that we don't have enough fruits and vegetables even produced globally for everyone to have access to the amount of fruits and vegetables that they would need to lead healthy lives, it's no surprise that the consumption is lower than these recommendations. And the estimate is that on average around the world, people consume only 267 grams per person per day. So almost half of the 400 grams that's recommended. And on top of that, about 3 billion people are not able to even afford a healthy diet. So this is not only a real health crisis, but it's also a real equity crisis that we need to solve. And the longer we wait to address these gaps, the larger our health crisis will be. So marginalized populations specifically won't have access to critical nutrients, fiber, and other compounds available in fruits and vegetables. In addition to this, we know that there are disparities amongst the different world regions in fruit and vegetable consumption. I've called out Central, Eastern, Southern, and Western Sub-Saharan Africa here because both on the fruits and vegetables estimates, they fall well below the recommendations, which are over on the far right-hand side of these graphs in the dark green line. So there are other world regions like Central Asia and Central Europe and Eastern Europe that fall short on fruits, and areas of the Caribbean and Latin America that fall very much short of the vegetable intake, the recommendations. However, we have found that the literature suggests that less than 20% of public and private investments go towards fruits and vegetables, specifically all types of horticulture crops. And within CGIAR, that number is less than 5% for fruits and vegetables. In the US government, we found that investments in horticulture crops were around 15%, but a majority of these dollars are being spent on high-price export markets in high-income countries. So there's very little investment actually going towards domestic consumption of fruits and vegetables. And the gaps that we see between the recommendations in production and consumption reflects this lack of investment, which sets the stage for this report that we conducted. So we were really trying to understand what is the state of global investments in fruits and vegetables, and what are the challenges and opportunities given this investment landscape. What we found is that across sectors, investments in fruits and vegetables were far below what we were hoping. And the green category on this slide, which encompasses all other crops, captures about 10 staple crop commodities. Globally, most investments are concentrated in wheat, maize, rice, oilseeds, and sugar crops, which have become critical for global food security, animal feeds, and biofuels. And the image at the top of this slide illustrates the disproportionate distribution of investments in different types of crops. So the vast majority of investments are being spent on a very small number of crops. In contrast, we have fruits and vegetables defined as all edible fruits and vegetables, including tree crops, orphan and traditional fruits and vegetables, wild harvested crops, and herbs and spices. Although this category didn't include starchy vegetables, which is consistent with most countries' food-based dietary guidelines. Based on that definition, we found that between 18 and 28% of agriculture investments were directed towards fruits and vegetables across different sectors. Although we think this is actually higher than what's realistically being invested, but nevertheless, if we do remember that at least half of our plate should be fruits and vegetables, we would expect that at least 50% of funding also go towards these crops. And on top of that, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of different fruits and vegetables compared to a very small number of staple crop commodities. And horticulture crops can also include highly specialized and developed value chains such as coffee, cacao, avocado, pineapple, mango, and tree nuts. We found that about half of investments in fruits and vegetables were actually allocated for these highly developed export-oriented value chains. And so that category is illustrated here on the graph in gray. And that left about an average of 11% of agriculture investments for locally consumed fruits and vegetables, which matches many of our previous estimates. So you can see the category here in red averages out to about 11%. So that brings us to the global report that we conducted, and the aim was to identify the most significant opportunities to advance equitable access to fruits and vegetables and to stimulate demand for healthy diets, ensuring improved nutrition for all. We conducted this report across 9 countries, including Kenya, Tanzania, and Ghana, and Benin in Africa, Guatemala and Honduras in Latin America, Sri Lanka, Nepal, and the Philippines in Asia. We used 2 different methodologies to conduct this work, including the Delphi questionnaire and the Q method. And our objectives were to understand the landscape of global horticulture, R&D, investment across 9 low and middle income countries. We also sought to identify the challenges facing horticulture investment in opportunity areas for investment along fruit and vegetable value chains, build local partnerships, strengthen research, implementation, and disseminate findings for sustainable impact. The 5 resulting priority investment areas are shown here, and these were the topics for each of our 5 webinars in the series. Today, we'll obviously be focusing on enabling market access for women through policy instruments, but we've also talked in depth about addressing post-harvest losses, enhancing extension services, elevating nutrition and consumer demand for fruits and vegetables, and strengthening seed systems and research infrastructure. So we encourage you to go to our website after this if you were unable to join our previous webinars and learn more about each of these other 4 topics. With that, I will pass things over to Ashley to talk more in depth about the gender-specific results from our report.
All right, thanks, Caroline. And yes, we're basically going to look at what does it look like? What are the findings that we found in terms of improving market access for women? Yes, so fruits and vegetables are basically, as Erin said, considered women's crops. And that's just because they can be grown on small plots and they're accessible with limited capital and land, while still offering a potential for strong financial returns. So you find that women are also, women are able to earn from these crops, and earning from these crops, they can be able to build independent businesses, have control over their income, and also it shows that, research shows that these women who are able to have control over their income, the result now is having a much more higher household nutrition levels and less food deficiencies rather than their male counterparts. So when their male counterparts get this money, yes, there's more money in their household, but it doesn't translate to better nutritional outcomes. And also you find that in this case, women are also more likely to look at nutrition related health issues and also just be able to in the long run reduce the micronutrient deficiencies. However, realizing the full benefits of these systems depends on stimulating consumer demand. Increased demand for fruits and vegetables not only improves the public health outcomes, but also raises their market value, creating strong economic incentives for women and smallholder farmers and reinforcing the gender equitable growth within the sector. When we look at the barriers to investment, we have to look at what market access looks like for women. They say that over 55% of experts identified fragmented markets and perishability and high price volatility as major barriers to fruit and vegetable investment. There's also the issue of rising import dependence, which is another major concern. You see that 22% of experts anticipate growing reliance on imported fruits and vegetables, with 35% of the respondents in Honduras warning of a displacement of national production. And it's not just in countries like this that we see this, you also see it in countries like Kenya, where we are often now, more dependent on imports as opposed to growing our national production, which at the end of the day, the people who are most affected are the women. And aside from the import issues, there's also the systemic constraints that women face, such as limited mobility and time burdens. When we talk about limited mobility, how far can they go to the market? Is the route to the market or the mobility means safe enough for them? And these are some of the things that now make them, excluded or face constraints in terms of market access. Other than that is also the exclusion from formal market systems, and this tends to be much more, available to men, and women seem to be less. They seem because they're more inclined to be pushed towards men. You find that women are now not put in formal market systems, which makes them less competitive in terms of their ability to market and to sell their produce. So what are some of the investment opportunities in terms of market access for women? One is gender responsive infrastructure. We've talked about safe transport. We talk about their mobility, but is it safe enough for them? Can there be aggregation points where they come and bring their produce so that they can be taken to the market, and it saves, in terms of mobility and time for the women? Can we create more inclusive market information systems? Men tend to be, as I said, to be at the forefront of with more access to formal markets than women, and women are mostly engaged in informal markets. So they're not able to access competitive trade or even build their capacity. So how do we ensure that markets are inclusive for women as well? Then there's the calls for strong institutional coordination, which is also important to see how can we be able to ensure that women's needs in terms of institutional coordination are brought to the front. And then targeted investment, higher, meaning we're talking about higher women's participation, profitability, leadership, and we see the returns on this in terms of women reinvesting in nutrition, in education, and community well-being as well. So when we look at improving market access for women, what we are basically talking about is how do we look at the return on investment? And these are some of the ROI indicators that we're looking at when it comes to improving market access. One is women's income from fruits and vegetables. And here we're not just looking at income, and we're also looking at income controlled by women, because when we look at income, and it's a good indicator, but it doesn't show us if they're able to control the amount. And if they are able to control the amount, then we're looking at them being empowered and them being transformed as women. When we look at the enterprise growth, we are also looking at how many women-led horticultural enterprises do we have. And then aside from the enterprises, we're also looking at the entire supply chain, looking at the percentage of women who are growers, wholesalers, entrepreneurs, and retailers, because it's important for us to be able to look at things from on the entire loop, and instead of just one aspect of the enterprise. Then when it comes to the market access, we're looking at things like how much time are they saving traveling to and from the markets? Are there improved perceptions of safety? Are these environments enabling for women to participate throughout the value chains? So it's not just saying there's a market there for those women, but how are they accessing their markets? Are they able to, do they feel safe in the process? And is the mobility issue also sorted out? And then in terms of policy inclusion for women, we're looking at the number of policy and regulations that are able to improve or address women's capital and market access needs. So it's for every, especially within continents like Africa, we keep saying that you cannot measure growth if you do not have a policy to back it up. So looking at these policies and regulations, we need to be able to ensure that the policies are inclusive of the needs and the capacities of women so that they can be able to have improved market access. And with that, I will hand it over to Frida to be able to take us through the panel discussion. Frida, take it away.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ashley and Caroline, for that overview and deep dive into the findings in market access for women. So we have seasoned experts as our panelists today, and so we have 3 of them, and I would introduce them. So the first panelist is Olivia Nyaidho. She is the Executive Director of Development in Gardening, Kenya, and Director of Mission for Development in Gardening Global. With nearly 20 years of experience working alongside smallholder farmers, she has dedicated her career to advancing horticulture and agroecology as pathways to more equitable communities. For more than a decade, Olivia has led DIG's programs in Kenya, which focus on training marginalized women farmers in agroecological vegetable production to strengthen food security, nutrition, resilience, and social cohesion. In her global role, she also provides technical support to DIG programs in Uganda and Senegal. Olivia holds a Bachelor of Science in Agriculture from Egerton University and a Master's in Project Planning and Management from the University of Nairobi. She serves on the governing board of PELUM Kenya, a leading network of organizations promoting agroecology solutions for smallholder farmers. So Olivia, welcome to the panel.
Thank you.
Our next panelist is Janelle Larson. Janelle Larson is a professor of agricultural economics at Penn State. Her research focuses on international rural development with work primarily on gender in development, land markets, and value chain analysis. She was involved in USAID-funded research projects on gender and horticulture in Honduras, funded by the Horticulture Innovation Lab at UC Davis, on gender in Cambodia, the Sustainable Intensification Lab at Kansas State, and on women's time poverty in Ghana, under the Peanuts Innovation Lab at Georgia. Larson is also the gender consultant for the Horticulture Innovation Lab at UC Davis and was co-chair of the Innovation Lab Affinity Group for Gender. Through these projects and the PSU Gender Equity through Agricultural Research and Education initiative, she has provided numerous workshops on gender in development and incorporating gender in research and outreach. In addition, she leads a multidisciplinary collaborative effort to develop livelihoods for highly vulnerable youth in Kenya, involving undergraduate students. Larson received Penn State's Global Lifetime Achievement Award in 2025. Welcome, Janelle. And our third panelist is Carla Legros, and she is a strategy and finance professional with over a decade of experience shaping agricultural and food systems across Africa. At One Acre Fund, she led the internal consulting team advising senior leadership on commercialization strategies for smallholder farmers. Previously at Dalberg Advisors, she advised development actors on investments in agribusiness, food systems, and inclusive finance. At Asley Africa, Carla developed and designed and operationalized blended finance incentives that mobilized $300 million in lending to agricultural SMEs. She is currently at CGAP at the World Bank, supporting financial institutions to design climate and gender responsive products. She is based in Nairobi, Kenya. So these are our experts for our panelists today to dive into our webinar topic on enabling women's market access through policies. So you are all welcome once again, and to go straight into our discussions. Okay, so our discussion will go in this order. So I would read out our questions, and then we'll have a discussion. We'll start off, maybe we go according to how we are presented on the screen. Janelle will start, followed by Carla, and then Olivia. Okay, so with your background, you all have really rich experiences in agribusiness, agricultural economics, and you have done extensive work involving women. So based on your experience, what do you think targeted investments in horticulture, how that can directly benefit women, both economically, socially, or otherwise?
All right, I guess I get to start us off for this one. I would say, as was presented in the background information, we often see horticulture, fruits and vegetables as a natural entry point for women, and that's typically the case, but less often in the market avenue than primarily for home consumption. As I was reading through the report, and as you presented or as presented, it was, a bit discouraging to see how limited development and investment in the value chain for horticulture has been compared to staple crops. But as I was reading through, I thought perhaps that's an advantage, because often when we're working on gender inclusion in agriculture, there's an existing institution or an existing value chain that's functioning, and it was established and created not with women's constraints in mind, without any consideration for what women might need. So perhaps we can see that there's an advantage that we're almost creating something from the ground up. Not quite. But if we are going to be building and enhancing value chains for fruits and vegetables, and my background and my work has primarily been with smallholder farmers. And so when I'm thinking about fruit and vegetable production, I'm thinking of smallholder farmers and more of a focus on local and domestic markets. Getting into export markets is, sort of a whole different scale, and that might be appropriate in sometimes in places, but that's not my familiarity. So I think when when I'm looking at potential for investing and developing horticulture for women, I think there is great potential. And again, as has been mentioned, we can look at it both from the production and the consumption side. Because again, if you're focused on smallholder farmers, even though they're producers, they often lack dietary diversity. I'll refer back more to a project that we had in Honduras that was, you know, a 5-year program. And there's no one else from Central America on the panel, so that can be what I'll be referring to. Women would grow fruits and vegetables, or they would just be available on the farm, especially the fruits. But there was still very little consumption. They would sell some at local markets, and if the quality wasn't adequate for the local markets, they'd feed it to their pigs. Even if it was perfectly fine quality, it just was not aesthetically pleasing. So there's just remarkably little awareness and understanding of the nutritional value. So I think as we're creating and establishing new value chains for horticultural production, it's important that we put women front and center and think about their constraints that we've mentioned in terms of access to land, access to credit, time and availability, and access to markets as we're developing those value chains, and also think about women as consumers, and typically the ones that are primarily responsible for feeding their families, and how that can all be integrated. And we can go into the specifics of that with some of the following questions.
Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Carla Legros. I'm based in Nairobi. I'm currently with CGAP as an independent consultant, and it's a pleasure to be here. So to answer to the question about how investing in horticulture can promote equity for women. So this was highlighted in the report, but I think it's important to call out again to answer this question, which is that women, when you're thinking about horticulture value chains, women tend to be concentrated in the production side or the supplier side if they're feeding into larger producers or larger off-takers, and they tend to be also concentrated in the primary processing level. So actually kind of the harvesting, removing additional stems if it's going for local markets or for export markets. And then there's also another aspect. If you're thinking about a large horticulture firm, women tend to be concentrated at the employee level and much less so the managerial and the ownership level. So my experience is a bit more on the export side when it comes to horticulture value chains, to complement the perspective that Janelle brought. So that's kind of the angle that I'll be speaking from as I answer these questions, and also from the financing side. So if you hear me talk a lot about financing, that's for that reason. So I think if you're investing more broadly in horticulture value chains, it's an opportunity to fast track income for women because women are overrepresented as employees. And we know from large bodies of research that when a woman has a job, it not only benefits her, but it also benefits her family and it benefits the community that she's part of. And it's a chance to bring women into the formal workforce if there is adequate investment in horticulture businesses that allows them to earn away from men, also because these crops tend to be classified as women's crops. Now, obviously, given that they tend to be concentrated more on the employee side of things, what do you do about the managerial and the ownership side? And one perspective that I can bring from my experience is I've come across models or approaches, or even through research that I've done, where you can find a significant opportunity if you right-size the technology for women to be able to access. And what I mean by that is if you're thinking about horticulture, as was highlighted in the study results, perishability is a major factor and a major constraint. So if you're able to bring chillers or cold storage or even processing equipment much closer to farm gate, that's an opportunity to bring that technology closer to where women are spending their day and doing their activities, that helps to reduce some of the time constraints that they might have. And also if that technology can be made smaller. So if you right size it so that it's more portable, therefore cheaper and more accessible, then you can kind of expand this ownership aspect in terms of horticulture opportunities for women. Maybe one more thing that I'll mention, which was also reflected in the study, which is bringing collection points closer to women, again, to kind of to try to solve some of the time constraints that women experience. And then, and I think an important point to, and final point to consider is creating more demand for nutritious foods that are part of the horticulture value chain. One observation that I've made is that yes, you know, especially for the vegetables, there's kind of an understanding that these are market targeted crops. But if you're looking at fruit, for example, people seem to kind of think of the tree is just there. The tree is just doing its own thing. It just happens to be on my plot and it's producing fruits, and I don't really have to invest in it. But kind of creating a sense that there is an economic opportunity as well as a nutrition opportunity if you kind of invest even at the granular level, at the plot level, so that people can put much more thought and much more intention around cultivating these crops and bringing them to market. So those are the insights that I'll share at this point, and I'm looking forward to engaging throughout the rest of the panel. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you again. I'm Olivia, Executive Director for Development in Gardening in Kenya. And I must say that this is a very interesting topic for me because most of my work has been with mostly women. About 80% of our beneficiary as development in gardening in Kenya, Uganda, and Senegal are women. And these women, they like to learn new techniques of growing vegetables and fruits. And also they acknowledge that fruits and vegetables give them returns in a shorter period of time compared to other cash crops that are there. And so this makes it very interesting. However, there are gaps that should be addressed, and making targeted investments in horticulture, you know, targeting women is will bring these benefits and will remove the barriers for women to participate in this. And one of the techniques that I highly think is effective and has worked for us is targeted extension for women farmers to grow and to engage in fruits and vegetable value chains. And so it means that investors or anyone who wants to do these targeted investments should target women, you know, and bring in extension approaches that are very friendly to women. This can be digital, this can be in-person extension approaches. And we also know that women, especially in rural areas, like to come together in groups, you know, in terms of group savings and loanings. And those are some of the avenues that we can target women. But yes, women are there already producing vegetables, but they may experience some of these barriers that prevent them from getting the real or their potential, reaching their potential in this kind of investments. And also, we know that women, when you talk to women, every woman seems to be so busy, you know, doing work at home, doing work in the farm and everything. One time we asked women, so what do you do when you're not working? I tell you, women in rural areas will keep working and working, you know, just to see their families succeed. And so even when we are doing these interventions, let's look at their daily calendars and check what time are they really available to listen to all this, whether it's a media thing put outside there for them to listen to, or it's an in-person kind of extension approach being given to women. So I think for this, I will stop there. Thanks.
Thank you so much. So very interesting conversations there. So as we have all heard, even with all the barriers that women face in participating in the markets, horticultural markets, there are still opportunities that they can contribute significantly. So we talked about livelihoods, improving their livelihoods and that of their families, and also about dietary, looking at the nutritional aspect of it. So there is a lot of benefits or positive impact in that direction. So in terms of policies, how can government policies or institutional frameworks be used effectively to expand some of these opportunities for women in horticulture?
Okay, I'll jump in again. I was going to say, in terms of policies at high level, I think it's important for that to be a framework. But we've probably all seen sometimes there are excellent policies and it falls through at implementation. So I think what's critical is that the policies have meaning and follow through, and also that the policies build on existing institutions and existing norms. For example, in Honduras, it's very common that a lot of the access to markets, access to inputs, even technical assistance is organized through producer organizations. And so if that is a robust institution in where you're working, I think it's valuable to work through those types of institutions. The challenge then is, how do you kind of, and contrary to what I was saying before, where there's very little in existence, how do you take an existing organization and either make it more accessible to women, or is it better at that point to have a separate type of producer organization? Based on some of what our experience has been in Central America, having organizations that are focused primarily on women, as Olivia was mentioning, that cater to women's time constraints, cater to women's specific needs, they're more able to be involved and also have leadership and effective participation. So working through producer groups that are really focused on women's needs is valuable. Something else that we found there is that there can be challenges with market aggregation, even among the groups. And so again, you have to work very closely and effectively on the ground to build aggregation sites, but also the calendar and timing to ensure that the producers are able to produce and have their produce available for the market when it's needed for the contracts that they may have developed through their aggregation sites.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. I'll jump in with some perspectives that are more on the finance side and the technology side. But before I get into those, I just want to acknowledge that there are multiple constraints, and this was highlighted in the report. And because there are multiple constraints, there's no one policy or even set of policies that will address the full scope of the problem. And so I'm sure as the panel, we will share bits and pieces there, and it's about bringing them together, and we might still not cover the totality of what's needed. So, so kind of drawing from my experience, speaking more on the finance side. So given some of the fundamental constraints that women experience in terms of not having land titles, and some of the barriers to access to credit for that, again, with this mindset of what can we do to see more women at the ownership stage within horticulture value chains, and engaging much more from a kind of productive or economic angle. So thinking about finance that can happen or that works without land titles. And so what are some mechanisms that would help to do that? So in some cases, earmarking credit for women, so providing capital to financial institutions. so that they are mandated but also encouraged, or encouraged but also mandated to lend to women, so that women can kind of transition from growing these crops for subsistence use and transition more towards commercial use. But also, this challenge around collateral is a major one, and it affects women disproportionately. And so what can we do around it? One of the things that can be done is to actually use the stock that women produce, the produce that come from the ground or from the tree, etc., as collateral against which they can access credit, or introducing more warehouse receipts, etc. But also from my experience, I've observed that financial institutions will say, well, we lend to the women that have physical collateral, and that's it. And that's a very small subset of women. So how do you expand that pool? So we already talked about warehouse receipts being one of the ways that you can do that, but there's also another way, which is an area that I have significant experience in, which is credit guarantees. And credit guarantees can be pretty effective at reducing the collateral requirements for women borrowers. But those credit guarantees have to be designed with women in mind. It can't be that it's the standard guarantees that are applied across all market segments. But let's say for a financial institution that might have a bit more rigid policies, if they're going to lend to a woman, they might want to see higher credit guarantees for that segment. And another area that I've seen with several institutions, financial institutions, is that they might say, for us to, or we have seen more women customers into our customer base when we reduce the interest rates, or when we reduce the down payment percentage. And there are mechanisms that enable them to do that, such as subsidies for origination that help them to supplement the income that they would get from the interest rate that they would charge on the loan or on an asset. And because that's reduced by a couple of percentage points, it becomes a lot more accessible for women. So those are some thoughts on the finance angle. And now on the technology side, I had spoken previously about right-sizing technology so that it's made smaller, more portable, more mobile, so that it can address some of the challenges around post-harvest loss and perishability more broadly, but also in terms of mobility, getting the product, the produce from farm gate to the markets. So what can policy do in terms of that? So potentially, we talked about kind of down payment support and interest buy downs, as I already previously mentioned, but also potentially VAT or tax relief in general on post-harvest equipment, not just at the industrial scale, but much more so at the smallholder or smaller scale, so that technology can be made more mainstream and can be more accessible for women. And then the last thing that I'll share outside of the finance and the technology part, which is something that I believe both Olivia and Janelle mentioned, which is more like gender sensitive extension. So given that a lot of extension, agricultural extension is kind of shaped by government, making sure that women are represented amongst extension workers to kind of reduce the barriers to engaging with that group. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carla and Janelle. I will add about 2 or 3 points. Maybe to add to the financial bit is that, which Carla well talked about, is that every time I'm out in the field, the women farmers keep asking me about a grace period for loan repayments. Which and especially loans that are brought down at group level, because sometimes women in the rural areas do not have collateral even to face even financial services that are meant for women, like in Kenya, we have one called Kenya Women, which targets women and is really women friendly, but people keep asking about the grace period to start repaying this loan. So that should also be considered if we are targeting women with financial services. In addition to that, I also believe that policies should be really inclusive and more equitable to favor women. This is in terms of every time policies are developed, I think people developing policies should wear an additional lens of how friendly is this to women, you know, how does this bring in equity so that women also have a good ground to come in. So those are considerations that I believe should be made. In some of these, let's look at the markets which are mainly male dominated. Some of these crops are grown by women, you know, but when you go outside there in the markets, regional markets, there are men who are there as middlemen, you know, who will pick all the produce from women and sell it at some other bigger profits than even the women are getting. So the market's infrastructure should really be women friendly so that women can participate at every level of the value chain of fruits and vegetables, not only at production level, but we should see women also in the transport sector, you know, even as middlemen, if there is need to be, we need to see women also as retailers of some of these fruits and vegetables. I know of a few women who have gone outside there and are running fruits and vegetable businesses in big towns, you know. This should be replicated even in other towns so that we have more women participating in every level of the value chain. One other one that really concerns me is the quantities or units of measure for some of this produce. Is there a standard for women to market their produce? Is it in kilograms? I know in Kenya, we are still struggling with such measures, you know, or is it just any quantity that someone wants to buy your produce in, you know? Is it, how I always wish that we could measure this in kilograms so that we know that, yes, I am selling this quantity, these kilograms of bananas at this price, as compared to just selling banana at any price that I want to sell. So if policies can handle such issues, I think that will really be beneficial to women farmers who are participating and all women participating at various levels of the value chain. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so yeah, I really like this discussion on policy. So not only are we advocating for gender sensitive or gender tailored policies, but the policies that are already existing, the implementation of it should be done in a way that would benefit women. So if you take, for instance, we're talking about educating or training women in several extension issues, but if the timing is not right for the women due to the gender roles that they play in their households, then women are automatically excluded because they are not able to attend some of these trainings. And so the policies are there all right, but when it comes to its implementation, there's always a challenge. And also we cannot look at making the policies or implementing them very intentional, targeting women, for instance, maybe when it comes to procurement, women-led enterprises or groups are targeted to be able to provide or supply some of these produce that are requested or are needed, rather than just leaving it so open for women and men in general to compete for. So very, very important discussions we are having. Okay, so in terms of ensuring that the benefits in horticulture, investment in horticulture What are some of the approaches that can help us to ensure these benefits to improve market access for women? So we want that market access. So we want women to be able to access the markets, but not just for a short period of time, but long-lasting and protected as such. So that, for instance, if women are known to be the ones who cultivate these horticultural crops, so they are termed as women's crops, but the study that we carried out recently showed that the findings showed that in the dry season, when the men are not cultivating their cash crops, they tend to cultivate the horticultural crops as well, because that is when the value for these horticultural crops are high. And so what are some of the approaches that we can ensure that women, even though they are in this space, whatever they are doing will benefit them in the long run or is long lasting?
I would say that it's important to perhaps challenge some of the assumptions that people have when we talk about policies or programs that are focused on benefiting women, benefiting women, I'll put that in quotes. I think often men, others in the community, others in the household see that as a direct threat, that if she benefits, then he is going to lose out. It's seen as a zero-sum game. And so it's important to have initiatives that are not just focused on the technology or the specific intervention. It's not only credit for women or market access for women, but that it's market access and that it shows how working with women's traditional areas of responsibility benefits not just her as an individual, but benefits the family as a whole and often the community as a whole. And so you really need, it sounds tricky, but you really need to have people sort of reflect on some of their assumptions and norms and be open and willing to modify them. If it's a culture where traditionally men handle all of the income or most of the income and make decisions about it, regardless of who generates the income. And we know that when women have more decision making about income, it has different, more positive outcomes for human capital. How do we go about doing that? And I'm an economist, so we don't think in those ways, but I've often collaborated with sociologists and they're really good at that sort of thing. So there have been, I know World Fish developed some interventions and some programs that embed role playing and almost, like theater type productions where they have people really reflect on household decision making. There was one that I saw demonstrated that was really looking at division of labor within the household and time constraints and what that can mean for somebody's ability to generate income or even just to have a moment to have a cup of tea. And it as an economist, I thought it would be very difficult to change people's attitudes, but there have been studies that have found over time using things like role playing or vignettes. I think Helen Keller has a really robust program that uses vignettes to do similar type programming work, and it has to be done at the community level. It can't just be at an individual and household level. One man might say, I want to support my wife in doing this, but then, his friends are going to meet him on the street and say, what are you doing? She's running all over you. So it has to be done at the community level. You have to work with local community leaders. Sometimes that might be the community priest. In this day and age, maybe it's somebody who's an effective influencer on social media who can have a broader impact. But I think we have to look at it as, fundamentally, it's not a zero-sum game. When women have more opportunities, when women perhaps have less responsibility in the household, that means that, you know, the children will be healthier, the children will be better educated, the community's market, you know, might thrive and have more market activity for men and women both. So I think we need to be intentional about focusing on the benefits to women, but we also need to frame it with a larger benefit in order for it, for one thing, to be implemented, and then beyond the end of the program or project to persist. And that has to be culturally sensitive and embedded within that community, however it's done.
Great.
Great. I think what I'll add to that, coming at it from a slightly different angle, I'd talk about maybe leveraging digital payments, again, with this lens of larger firms employing many women, but also in some cases kind of the smallholder angle, assuming that there's a sizable enough off-taker. So leveraging digital payments, given that that's becoming much more prevalent in many markets, so that women can have ownership and be able to protect the income that they receive. So that could be one potential angle. And that would help women kind of build credit history themselves in situations where women are able to access assets. If the asset finance is designed with the woman in mind, ensuring that it is the woman that takes on the asset to basically build that credit history, which then will put her on a ladder where she's able to access other types of finance down the line. So that would be a second one. We already spoke about bringing some of the infrastructure closer to home, to address some of the time constraints elements. And then maybe another thing that I'll say, which is more of a general point, which is playing the long game. Any of these interventions will take time because there are deeply set structural factors at play. And so playing the long game, so not just 1 year or 3 years or even 5 years, basically being willing to invest in the longer term and being willing to track, you know, how is that evolving over time? How is the system evolving over time as it relates to women's market access in horticulture? So those would be the points that I would add. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think I will bring in a few more points. One is to ensure sustainable production of fruits and vegetables. Maybe we should think of women-friendly irrigation techniques, which will encourage women or will enable women even irrigate their produce, you know, throughout the season. In Kenya, we have seasons where we have vegetables and other seasons where we don't have. And even to encourage really some good post-harvest handling practices, maybe solar drying of these vegetables so that they are able to even access markets during dry spell. And sorry, my background. My other one was to encourage even support from men so that, or get their buy-in at family level so that women can also discuss and agree on use of land at family level. You know, we increase women's ability to be able to talk about how best to use land. You know, one time we had trained women on how to produce vegetables, and this woman did so well. She got more produce, she got more income from vegetables than they got from maize. But the following season, when I went back, the whole piece of land was covered in maize. Why? Because the husband insisted that they have to produce maize, which at the end of it, the maize still ends up only able to take care of maybe 2 months. But because it's the man who has more control over land, you know, it's the reason that this happened. So we encourage women to to be able to talk at family level or have a dialogue over the use of land and the most profitable or efficient use of their land. One other approach that I saw that has worked for us is that one time with this one model woman, or let me say the use of role models, women role models. So I know of one woman who is doing very well in the sector of fruits and vegetables. She actually supplies most hotels. Her supply is mostly on to hotels, you know, and she has done very well because she's a retailer. And one time we took this woman to talk to a women group who are producing vegetables so that she tells them that it is possible even with women. We may be at different levels of the value chain, but she was there to encourage the women at production level to keep on producing because there's market and that she can come back and buy from them, you know. And this mostly works for I think most of the examples I give are mostly for domestic markets. That's where I have much more experience. And this worked because in one way, the women who are producers got contacts of a woman who supplies the hotels. And anytime they have produce, they know where to take to, instead of just starting from nowhere. So having women role models also has worked to encourage other women in different areas of the value chain come up. My other points would be the aggregation, which Janelle talked about at the start. Even today, I was out in the groups and farmers have produce. Women farmers have produce, but how much do they have? They have small quantities. And so if women can come together and they have aggregation centers and their produce is put together and taken to other markets, I think that will really enhance their market access over time. And yeah, this has been a very good discussion for me. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so I really like the discussions on sensitizing the communities in which the women operate is very important, because if we come up with all the enablers for the women to be able to participate or have access to markets, and at the end of the day, they are not able to fit into where their communities, or do not get the support from their families, it always becomes a challenge in the end. And there have been studies that have shown, so there was this pineapple study that I carried out in a community in Ghana where women, so because of their limited access to land, the whole study was to get the women, so it was a women's group, get them land to be able to produce the pineapples themselves. So it was pineapples, produce the pineapples themselves. And in that case, they are able to keep the monies, because most times they have to work on other people's farms, men's farms. And so the approach was to get the men involved, because usually when they do not get the understanding, they try to sabotage or stall anything that the women want to do. So, and we also realized later on that the pineapple farming, when it gets to a certain stage, is laborious, and we would definitely need the men to help in manning or taking care of the farm at that stage where the women are unable to go in there. And so it was a win-win for the men and the women, because in the end, the men saw the outcome, the income that was coming into the family, and they had that sensitization and understanding. So I guess that is a good approach to get everyone involved, and at the end of the day, it's a win-win for everyone and for the communities in which they are. So thank you all very much. So we have our last question. And here we are going to share our specific examples from the works that we have done that illustrates a successful initiative or key lesson in promoting gender equity in horticulture.
And Frida, these are amazing
Yes.
insights. I think for this last question round, we might do a speed round so that we can maybe take one question from the community, and also I would encourage the panelists, you can look over the questions and comments that have come in afterward too, and perhaps engage with some of our listeners that way too. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
I'll keep it quick. So a successful intervention that I'm familiar with was actually funded through the Horticulture Innovation Lab, and we developed and carried out gender-sensitive farmer field schools. So it was developed with a local women's producer group, and it was a field school. What made it unique was that it embedded and combined throughout the production content and gender content. So if people wanted to learn how to produce vegetables, they also had to think about intra-household dynamics at the same time. You know, there was a 12-week series. I think somebody's chatting. So it was combining both the technical content and gender at once. And as others have mentioned, the design was with the local community, so we made sure that it was at a time convenient for mothers. We provided childcare, which I think at that time at least was sort of a new thing to do with technical assistance, and we provided lunch so that the women didn't have to feel like they had to dash home to feed their kids. So we developed the curriculum with them, provided the support that mothers and women needed to be there, and it incorporated both gender and technical content. We had 2 cohorts, one that was only women, one that was mixed men and women, and both of them were very successful. The men were very, very open and appreciative of this. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you.
I'll share a quick example. There's one of the solar equipment companies had basically solar powered cold storage, and we were exploring with them how they can do this right sizing that I've been talking about. And they had managed to run a pilot where they were able to bring that technology closer to farm. So not exactly at farm gate. So individuals did not have, their own solar chillers, but they were closer kind of within the village. So that way, some female entrepreneurs were able to access the technology. And what was needed, other than kind of modifying the size of the technology, was also modifying the pricing structure or the repayment structure so that it would be more volume based. So that way there's kind of skin in the game on both sides. The company providing the technology, but also the entrepreneur who is bringing her own produce to the chiller, but also sourcing from other people. And so that was quite an innovative approach to reducing some of the barriers. So that's one I'll share. Thanks.
Thank you.
We'll share our experience from developments in gardening across the 3 countries we work in, but maybe specifically in Kenya, where I am based. So our one methodology that we use to train farmers is called the Farmer Field School approach, which was a brainchild of the United Nations FAO. And like I said, 80% of our attendees are women. So one time, before we start to train them, we find out what time of the day are they available. So depending on the time that the women are available, that is the time that we schedule to do the training. And most of the time here, it is early in the morning, especially in the rural areas. So our trainings run from 8 to around 10, because these women have to go back to make lunch for their children. And then we use the adult education approach. So this time around, we were focusing on indigenous vegetables in Kenya. And the women, yes, went ahead. It was a new group, really, really new group that had not done this before. So they went ahead and grew these vegetables. But in the process of our training, we did a market research. So we went out with women to the nearest markets where they would sell their produce, and we allowed them to speak to retailers in that market and get contacts. And they got more information that we even thought they would get, you know. They got information about the timing of this produce. They got information about the quality that is needed. And they also got information about the times when there's not enough of that vegetable in the market, so that they can take advantage of the off-season times. And then we also did cooking demonstrations of this vegetable produce, or these vegetables in a market setup, so that it was more accepted. You know, everyone tasted these vegetables. And after that, the women now are taking their vegetables to the retailers in the market. Some of them are just selling at home. And yes, kind of things are moving, not yet where we want it, but at least things have moved a little bit. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So, Erin, are we able to take one question as you suggested?
Yeah, let's do one quick question, and then we can do just a quick highlight of the overall study results. But
Yeah.
I've learned a ton from this panel, and yeah, I would love just if we could all work on it together. I feel like there's some common vision here. It's really nice to see. So, do you want me to pick out a question, or do you have one in mind?
Sure. No, so please go ahead. There are certain very, very nice comments and suggestions in the chat. So please, let's feel free to read them.
Okay.
Yeah, so
So if I can just chime in briefly, there are lots of great comments in the chat I saw coming through about ideas and various things. I think we just have one actual question for our panel here at the end. So the question was, what considerations are pivotal for enhancing women-friendly policies that foster supportive technologies and practices together with access to resources for women in the developing world? So maybe we could just take that question quickly and then we'll highlight some of our global results.
okay.
And so again, just briefly, that question is about what are the considerations for enhancing women-friendly policies to support to foster supportive technologies and practices together with access to resources.
So
And any
of the
panelists?
panelists can address this question.
I can try to take this one on. So given that it's a broad question, but an important one, I will try to answer it from a principles perspective, which is having a principle of designing with women in mind, which sounds simple, but kind of the underlying reason is if you design for where there are the most constraints, then you kind of get to lift all boats, right? And I'm saying this broadly, so this is not to say it's simple and it's straightforward, but designing for where the constraints are the most present or the hardest can help in terms of making sure that policies and technologies and practices take into account where some of the challenges are the most present and can address some of the constraints that women are facing.
Thank you. So you would all agree with me that we've had a very interesting conversation around market access for women and how it can be shaped with policies. So I guess our take home, very brief, even though there are systemic challenges that women face in accessing markets, there are still a lot of opportunities that will benefit not only women, but their households and their communities. And we've been able to dissect quite a number of these approaches and policies that would shape or bring a lot of benefits to women and their communities. So thank you very much, our panelists, Janelle, Carla, and Olivia, for your great insights into this discussion. Over to you, Erin. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. We really appreciate all of your insights and sharing your experiences. We have about 8 minutes left, so I will pass it to Archie just for a very quick overview of some of our global results, and then Erin will wrap up talking briefly about responsible innovations and our call to action. So I'll pass it to Archie now. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. And yes, I encourage everybody to follow the link that's in the chat to dive into these reports. There's a lot of information there. But starting with this first one, the figure on this slide illustrates 6 overarching categories of barriers that constrain investment in horticulture, as identified by the experts in the study. And those experts included NGOs, or represented NGOs, private sector, academia, and policymakers or government. These barriers range from unsupportive policy environments to increasing climate volatility to fragmented markets and limited extension services. Market challenges were reported to be the most significant barrier to investment. More than half of the experts identified fragmented markets, perishability, and high price volatility as major barriers to fruit and vegetable investment. Fruit and vegetables were seen as risky, high-value commodities with limited market infrastructure, especially cold chains, and export market instability further de-incentivized investment in the horticulture value chains. Next slide, please. In the study, we then asked experts what they perceive as the key consequences of inadequate fruit and vegetable investments in the short or long term. Nearly half of the experts noted that health would degrade, particularly through malnutrition, heightened food insecurity, and increased dependence on ultra-processed foods. Over 40% of the experts also identified reduced productivity as a key consequence of the inadequate fruit and vegetable investment and a direct contributor to limited affordability and access. Some other common responses included outmigration from agriculture and declines in farmer participation, which have contributed to rising fruit and vegetable prices, reduced economic growth, and increasing dependence on imports. Next slide, please. To better understand the global priorities for fruit and vegetable investments, experts were then grouped based on shared viewpoints and distilled from their Q statement rankings. The analysis revealed two distinct groups that reflect differing but complementary perspectives on how to most effectively strengthen the horticulture sector through targeted investments, with academic and NGO stakeholders highlighting strengthening technical and human capacity across the value chain, invest in skills, inputs, and infrastructure to improve productivity, resilience, and fruit and vegetable consumption. And local seed systems are key to innovation and adaptability. The government and private sector groups highlighted strengthen research and capacity and integrate horticulture into national science and technology agendas, policy development alongside data systems and education as essential for sustained investment and transformation in the sector. Next slide, please. The ultimate goal from this research is to leverage this expert feedback that was collected and convert it to action. in order to improve human health, gender equity, rural economic resilience, and environmental outcomes. Key suggestions for actions that in the horticulture sector include prioritizing fruit and vegetables in national policies, establishing multi-stakeholder platforms, and incentivizing local governments and grassroots campaigns to engage in the horticulture sector. To achieve these objectives, we call on country governments, donors, multilateral agencies, and private entities and research institutions to join this effort. And I'll pass it now to Erin to describe the efforts of responsible innovations, which align with the efforts of this report.
Thanks, Archie, and all. Again, huge thank you to our panelists who have offered a lot of insight today. Yeah, so responsible innovations came to be about 6 months ago in order to preserve a lot of the food systems equity work that the Horticulture Innovation Lab was doing. And so the responsible innovation stands on a decade of incredible academics working across the globe together in fruits and vegetables. And now we've had this wonderful opportunity to expand our mission to food systems at large and put a lot of those well-tested technologies and tools to use in a much more broad fashion. So our mission is to do well by doing good. We are a dynamic global network of agricultural and food systems researchers, practitioners, and innovators working at the intersection of research and real-world application. And our mission is to make equity-driven innovation in food systems the norm by equipping organizations and businesses with tools, knowledge, and partnership they need to scale responsibly and inclusively. And we are committed to catalyzing evidence-based, community-centered solutions that ensure innovations genuinely serve the people they are designed for. So really making research more accessible, affordable, and action-oriented, and driven with our partners in West and East Africa, South Asia, and Central America that we work with. So equitable partnerships is at the center of what we do. We are there to serve our responsible innovation network. We care a lot about social impact and really want to be clear about the trade-offs within our food systems. It was mentioned today, I think Carla brought up a great point that you can't really achieve anything with one policy. There is no silver bullet. So the best thing you can do is really go in eyes wide open with an interdisciplinary, intersectoral approach to really create effective holistic solutions. So these are some of the services that we offer. We have food systems research, like I mentioned, systems-based research across the food landscape. We have innovation packages and field trial management. So we have a suite of innovations for post-harvest, production, irrigation was mentioned today, and some of our market and economic innovations that are ready to go and tested. Those on the call have actually used those quite a bit. We have Gender Up, which I linked into the chat because we are now working with quite a few multilateral organizations and have trained about 150 Gender Up specialists globally now, which is a method to ensure that innovation is created and curated and scaled in a way that will benefit women and other marginalized populations. And that lends to our larger responsible innovation and scaling portfolio and capacity strengthening. Next slide. So if you want to become an RI network, RI expert, we truly believe that we're stronger together. We have had a lot of interest in becoming a part of the network. So we are now developing our system to verify everyone and get them onto the website. We send out quarterly newsletters. We provide trainings and webinars. And we also try to highlight all of our RI experts within our thought leadership activities. So this webinar is a great example of it. We have many of our RI experts are on the call and helping with this. So really trying to promote everyone in this space and make sure that they get the credit they deserve for their expertise. So next slide, please. With that, I will just say thank you so much. Please join us. You can check out our website, Responsible Innovations. That's also where our report is linked. And we hope to see you soon out there advocating for fruits and vegetables. So thanks so much for this whole team who put the webinar series together and our panelists. I'm really looking forward to working with you in the future.